Hey folks, Doug Blake with Body Design University. Welcome to another weekly study. And today I want to talk about how to memorize, and it's always going to be about memorization for the most part. How to memorize, in this case, it's from an actual post in the group, heart anatomy, okay, the human heart. And so NASM, although they don't place a whole lot of emphasis question-wise on just standard, straightforward questions related to anatomy. Just depends on which test you get. They'll ask 2, 3, sometimes maybe even up to 4 or 5 questions on anatomy. And if you go through the group, one of the reasons why it's a really good idea to post things like this one individual posted that we're going to talk about is to get some feedback, because a lot of folks that have already taken the NASM exam are still actively participating in the group. And so you'll go in and some folks will post and say, oh yeah, I took the test 3 months ago, didn't have one question on anatomy. And then another person will chime in and say, yeah, I had like 3 questions and they were talking about the heart and the chambers of the heart and yada, yada. And so you just don't know what you're going to get. Remember, NASM runs through 4 or 5 different, I think it's 5 different tests. And that makes sense because you don't want to take a test on Monday and then 2 weeks later get the same exact test. So they have different tests with different questions. And although the percentages within the particular domains, percentage-wise, are going to be the same, the questions are going to be different. So it's a good idea. And by the way, it's just a good idea to know basic anatomy, even when it comes to the heart and the cardiovascular and the cardiorespiratory system, some elements of the nervous system, yada, yada. So it's a good idea. And so that's why in this particular question, I'm going to bring up here for you, we're going to look at memorizing heart anatomy. Now, look, when all is said and done, it's memorization. And I've said this on anytime we do a weekly study, your ultimate goal when it comes to getting prepped for the NASM exam is to understand that you start the learning process by memorizing. Reading is not how you learn things. That's not studying. So reading is not studying. You have to be actively engaged with the material. And so this is one of those perfect opportunities to delve into some aspects of memorization, okay, that go well beyond just reading. And I think, we normally will see a lot of folks coming back with one of my favorite ways of dealing with memorizing anatomical structures, okay? But first, let's just go ahead and kind of look first at what the post was. It was a basic question. And by the way, this is one of the best ways to do it, folks. Just so you know, screenshot the question and throw it up and post it. And let's go ahead and take a look at it. I mean, that's the goal, is to help you pass the darn test the first time. And you got to memorize and you got to memorize material. And you got to understand sometimes what the questions are asking. Now, I will say this. It's not often that NASM just asks a straightforward definitional question. They do. Absolutely, they do. But that's not the vast majority of questions, okay? The vast majority of questions are going to have some sort of situational component to it, or even some calculations. That's the, as far as I'll go with that from a questioning perspective. But not all their questions are going to look like this, but some actually do. So the question is simple. After leaving the left ventricle, blood enters which structure? If you know your heart and you look and you go, boom, you already know what the answer is. Now, the question in this case is, how do I memorize that though? Because that's really what we're talking about. How do I memorize that it's the aorta and not the pulmonary artery, right? Because if you have studied and memorized the structure of the heart, how does blood flow through the circulatory system? Okay. Now, remember, I've memorized this over many, many years of looking over and over and over. Now it's just blasted into my memory. Okay. Right atrium, right ventricle, pulmonary system, left atrium, left ventricle, systemic circulation. Well, the aorta takes the blood from the left ventricle to the systemic circulation. That's pretty straightforward. The pulmonary anything, pulmonary arteries, pulmonary veins are always going to be associated with the right side of the heart, the aorta, and that structures are dealing with the left side of the heart. Now, if you know that and you've memorized it, that's great, but that's not what the question is. The question that's being asked by this particular individual that posted is, how do I memorize this then? How do I do it? Well, the answer is don't worry about the heart per se. This is going to work for anything you have to memorize. And that's why in this particular case, I thought it'd be interesting to kind of show you, give you some examples, because at the end of the day, it's always about what type of learner are you? My answer to the question that anybody ever asks me as to, can somebody help? You see these posts all the time, right? And these are good posts. Can somebody help me? Can somebody give me a tip or a trick on how to learn or memorize this material? I'm taking my exam in 3 weeks. I'm taking my exam in a month, or whatever the case is. Any tips? Well, the answer is no, there are no tips. There's really one thing you have to know is, what type of learner are you? Because when you know what type of learner you are, now you know how to attack and navigate the materials that you're trying to memorize. So I try to make this as simple as possible. I've been teaching this for years. If you know the way your brain works, audiological, visual, tactile, if you know that your major comfort level of memorizing material, notice I didn't say learning. I did not say learning material. I said memorizing material. All your learning, all of this stuff that we talk about with the NASM materials always begins with memorization. You've got to memorize data, information, visual aspects of material that now you can utilize in whatever way you need to utilize it. In case of an exam, you need to be able to regurgitate that memorized information to answer a question. That's the way this works. You can now go off on multiple rabbit trails as to exactly how you do that. And that's why it helps to know what type of learner you are, or that way of learning or that way of memorizing material that's of most relevance and most comfortable for you. If I was to right now have you close your eyes and start talking to you about the heart and the different structures of the heart, some of you will actually be able to memorize what I say. Others of you, you'll just zone out as I'm talking to you. That's the difference between an audiological learner and, say, a visual or tactile learner. If you are predominantly an audiological learner, then it doesn't matter what you do here. You have to kind of listen to the material kind of over and over, and you'll start to catch things, right, that are being said. That's why for a lot of folks watching me right now, as you're watching me and listening to me, you're getting a double whammy effect if I'm actually drawing things and showing you things, okay? Some folks and students tell me this all the time, I actually have to watch. Even though I'm listening to it and I'm looking at the presentation, I have to see the teacher, the instructor going like this and waving their hands and doing things, because there's an engagement level that actually helps with the memorization process. Okay, there's a lot to this. So I try to keep it as simple as possible. For the most part, the questioner is like most folks when it comes to learning type. You're not an audiological learner, and you may be visual, probably more visual than anything else. But here's what I will say. There's nobody that I know that does not have some sort of tactile component to their learning that's really, really important. And when I'm saying tactile, I'm talking about stimulatory to the hands, to the feet, even stimulatory to the visual cortex. What we know is that if you pick up a pen or you pick up a pencil, what else do I got in here? A marker. When you use these in any component of your memorization process, you will increase your retention capabilities significantly. And that's why I always kind of like when people go, here's a picture of the heart that I drew. Bingo. I'm going to tell you right now that when all is said and done, drawing the heart, drawing the cardiovascular system is probably going to help 90% of you right off the bat. Don't freak out. Don't get all crazy. Get yourself a coloring book or just do it. Just look, look what I pulled off the internet. Here's what I want you to think about. You're looking at this going, what the heck does a blender and an engine have to do with anything? Let me ask some of you a question. How many of you could, if I gave you just the sheets, just like this, how many of you within the next 15, 20 minutes could memorize all the terms on here? On the blender? That's a little bit simpler, right? There's this, and this. Well, I don't know. But this is a good representation of the issues and problems that folks have. This is relatively simple, right? You can write these down and you can associate them. How many of y'all have a blender? Most of you have a blender, right? And you probably, without even looking at any of these words, you could probably tell me what they are. If I gave you a test, what would the components of this be? So for the most part, folks, you would probably be familiar with this. If you don't have a blender, get one. You should be using it for your shakes anyway. But think about that. On this side is a relatively simple machine mechanism that has some parts associated with it. How well could you do memorizing that material? If you're familiar with it, it's a piece of cake. On the other hand, on this side, this is the internal combustion engine, or at least one cylinder, right? There's the piston head. How many of you are familiar with the structure of an engine? For most of you, this is just, it might as well be Greek. Well, that's why I put these up, because that's basically what we're talking about with heart. How familiar are you? Some of you are very familiar because you've either read about it, you remember biology, whatever the case is. Just like with this, I would tell you the same thing with your blender and your engine. The heart is it's just a picture, and memorizing it is going to involve three basic things. Do it however you want to do it. It doesn't matter. If you know that your learning style is audiological, then do all this and listen, right? And you can go, my goodness, YouTube videos, there's a million of them out there. There's no limit to the number of visual and audiological inputs you can get to help you memorize something as simple as the heart. Okay. So, and by the way, I'm not going to give you I'm not going to label it for you. I got that on the next slide. But you see what I did is I went to Google and I put in heart, and I could have printed this out. And now I have, something that I can now draw or color. My recommendation is that you use coloring. I know it's like third grade, but trust me when I tell you, and you can ask any other students that chime in on a post like this. Coloring is one of the best ways to retain and memorize information. Just like listening to music, there are a number of strategic inputs that will help you to memorize the material. Okay, that's the goal. And labeling, for some folks, in other words, drawing a line and writing and doing that over and over and over. That's also very helpful. So when I say coloring, I mean saying left ventricle, write it wherever you want, and then color it. It gives you some time actually doing it. And you color the left ventricle, and you color the right ventricle, the right atrium, and color it, make it a different color, make them similar colors. It doesn't matter. It's the engagement with this particular sheet, right? And the structures, that is what's going to help you to memorize. Labeling, for those of you that like to write it out and are visually able to understand the picture and the words that are associated with it, you can memorize that. And then your ultimate goal is, now I'm going to be honest with you, when I do stuff like this, when I draw, I don't just use one, I print out 5 of these. I print out 6 of them. Every time I write through it, I roll it up and throw it out and do it again. It's consistent repetition. That's what's going to help you to memorize, right? Right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium. And this is actually, honestly, this is, pretty straightforward, very basic structures. Aorta, whoop, that's the aorta, right? Left atrium, left ventricle. One of the reasons it's the left ventricle, by the way, is because the wall is much thicker, just as a aside. Color it in, label it, drawing it, right? Coloring, labeling, drawing, whatever, and repeat over and over and over until You can grab that sheet of paper, right? And then you can literally just write, just grab a pencil and you know exactly left atrium, left ventricle. Yes, draw your arrows, atrium to ventricle, ventricle, left ventricle out to the aorta. Yes, that's fine as well. I'm not trying to work on the heart per se. I'm trying to help you to memorize when it comes to diagrams. That's the goal here, is to give you a more general concept of memorization. And the way we do that is we use colors, we use all of these input methods to help your brain, the way your particular brain works, to engage and memorize the material. I'm just saying coloring is one of the best ways to do it. Now, so in this case, some of you look at this and you go, oh my goodness, and you have a heart attack. No pun intended. But the point is there's so many words and you're looking going, I'll never memorize this. Oh my God, that's the superior vena cava, the pulmonary blah, blah. Now, others of you will look at that, and because of the C component of your personality, you like that linear, straightforward type of thinking. And you go, okay, well, let me go ahead and start the process of looking and drawing it over. And that's a great way. That's a great diagram for you to use. Others of you won't be able to use this diagram because it's confusing. It's too many words. Whatever the case, for those folks, some of you are like that, you might want to use something like this, which is just a labeling diagram. Okay. And basically all I've done here is I've taken that same blank heart and give it numbers. See, this is a lot easier to deal with. The number 2 is just easier on my brain. I don't know for you, but the point is you've got to find that methodology that doesn't freak you out and that you're able to engage with and start that process of memorization. So just keep that in mind. I'm just giving you some ideas, some clues, right? Remember, this is an engine. There's simply no way you're going to memorize all of this unless you really like engines, and you might actually know how to do this. It's very complicated. Not so complicated. Most people are very familiar with it. You got to familiarize yourself with this. And the only way that happens is not looking at it once and hoping that you memorize it after the first shot. No, you've got to do it over and over again. Okay. So if this one doesn't freak you out, then go on Google heart and look on your images and you'll find, you can just print them out. Okay. You can go to YouTube and look at, all these different videos of folks that do the same thing. At the end of the day, what do you have to do though? What do you have to do? You have to print the stuff out, get it over, and you got to do this. It takes time and it takes effort and energy. But the reward is you will memorize it. Please, 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 unless you are, a learning freak, watching stuff is not how you learn and memorize. Just doing this and watching a YouTube. No. That's not how it works. You got to get down and dirty with it. By the way, if you've gone through any of our studies on the NASM textbook, the general study guide, and then the chapter by chapter study guides, you already know that what we do is we recommend read, write, recite. You got to get down and dirty with writing. I know it's not the thing to do nowadays, but it is by far one of the best ways to engage material, memorize material, pen, pencil, write. Literally, you got to write those words. You have to write left atrium, right atrium. You've got to write the words down. You got to write them over and over. I've been doing this for years when it comes to learning. Anything that I do or I teach students to do is going to ultimately come back to reading, writing, reciting, coloring, the labeling, anything like that. It's one of the reasons why I have so many pads. I'll show you. I just keep pads. All these pads are designed for one thing: to keep rewriting, drawing over and over and over. And then once I start going through them, I just remember, I'm tearing up paper, throwing them out and doing it again and again. It's that process that is critical. That's how you're going to memorize any anatomical structure. I get very passionate about this because What I do know is that if you do it this way, you will memorize the material. In fact, you'll be dreaming about it and you'll hate me because now you can't get it out of your head. Um, do this with all the structures of the body. When you're going through the NASM textbook, just keep in mind, they want you to memorize certain things, and it doesn't matter whether you think it's going to be on the test or not. Fact of the matter is that it's in the textbook. Go through the BDU general study guide to kind of let you know what chapters are truly important percentage-wise on the exam, and then of course you can go through the chapter by chapter, particularly if you're a BDU student that's going through this. But from a purely test-taking perspective, memorize that material so well that when you get that question that we just saw, which was a great post, thank you, by the way, for posting that. When you get to that, it's just so obvious. You can just answer the question without any issues. Remember, the goal is to help you pass the NASM exam on the first attempt. That's what we're here. That's what we're here to help you do. If you have any questions, again, post them just like this individual did inside the group. If you have any questions on this particular video, let us know. If you need more explanation on certain parts of this, absolutely, we can do studies, another weekly study on it as well. Remember, Corey and I do a Q&A every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern time. And again, I hope this is helpful. Just let us know by leaving some comments for us. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. Thanks.